Matt Wilhelmy. I'm the owner of Strategic Voyages Business Consultants. I'm also the author of Taboo Business Questions, What's Haunting Every Entrepreneur's Growth. And today I'm really excited because I'm joined by Jill Simonds. Jill is the founder and CEO of Savvy Strategic Partners, a full-service, fractional, C-suite serving business owners with an experienced collective of outsourced executive leadership, serving across the functions of operations, revenue, and finance. She's a self-proclaimed corporate dropout. After 10 years in the marketing space, she's found her passion supporting B2B organizations as a fractional COO and EOS integrator. She has a master's degree in organizational leadership and finds her greatest fulfillment and success in helping others realize their full potential, both personally and in business. Jill, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this conversation for a few reasons. Number one, it's not every day I get to talk to somebody with a master's degree in organizational leadership. So I'm sure it won't be a quiz, but I'm sure we'll be drawing on some of the things that you went through in school, but also more honestly, how you've applied those. I think about some of the educational journeys of the guests that I've talked to, and what you learn in the textbook and in the classroom is one thing, but then when you get to the business world, you do kind of apply it. And so I'd love to hear just an example or two, of some of your background and kind of how you got to this place. I think you talked a little bit about a health and wellness company, and maybe you could tell us a little bit about that.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, so starting first with just the background education, why I chose that route was having been in the corporate world, right? Quick and rapid growth, leading teams, leading people pretty early on in my career. I'm a social leader and knew that, when it came to continuing education, the MBA and having a master's of business administration was one thing. The ins and outs and nuts and bolts of logistically owning, running, growing a business. My passion area is people. So the organizational leadership was something I dove into because, in hindsight, at the time, I knew it was going to be more so about managing human capital, human energy, working with people, communication, alignment, business strategy, vision building, all of those elements of a business, and managing the human energy and the energy of human capital is what drove me to that, to then apply to the roles in businesses that I serve now. And then as far as the health and wellness company, media company that I was with for several years, I discovered EOS in that journey. So here I was at the helm operating the business, business owners that were very much in that owner's seat and not so much involved regularly on the day-to-day of the business, seeking that system, right? Seeking a methodology and a process and program and structure of operating the business that didn't entail in reinventing a wheel of our own. So what that provided us as, a clean and simple, proven operating system is what took that business to a $15 million revenue company and having 10x the profit over the course of just a few years in that seat and really operating that system.
That's some pretty tremendous growth. And I just wanted to take a moment because not only are those results pretty incredible, you also have used a couple of words and language that might be unfamiliar to some of the people in our audience.
Sure.
And I think I'm very familiar with traction. You can kind of see the book over my shoulder. I integrate, I'm an integrator at a lot of different companies. I've seen it work. I know what traction is. And so if you hear this term EOS, you hear this term integrator, people who know what that is, they get it, right? They speak that language. But there's a lot of people that maybe haven't heard of it and maybe want to know more. And so just really quickly, I'd love to get your take on kind of what traction is, how it works in companies. How would you describe it to somebody in maybe 30 seconds? What is traction and what is EOS?
So EOS is not a platform, right? It's not a system online. When we hear operating system or we hear system, that's oftentimes what comes to mind. It is a business system of simplified tools, of processes to bring focus, alignment, and health within growing entrepreneurial organizations.
Yeah, I first discovered Traction about 10 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and it actually was recommended that I read the book because I was working in an accounting firm where everybody was extremely intelligent, very educated, but they were having a lot of communication issues because they spoke
Mm-hmm.
different languages. You would think like, oh, well, like all accountants should be able to talk to each other. Well, they don't,
Mm-hmm.
because what one person calls, you know, operations, the other person calls, you know, interior functionality, and you just have a different vernacular, and it really becomes kind of complicated. And so EOS just really quickly kind of gets to the point of all that and puts everybody on the same page using the same words. The other part of EOS that's really interesting is their format and their structure of kind of running a business with quarterly goals called rocks, and
Right.
setting these objectives and kind of getting everybody rowing in the same direction. I've seen it work really well. And so what I heard you say is you discovered this while you're working for this health and wellness company. But part of your background that's really interesting to me is that you were then able to take that skill set and apply it in a number of different ways beyond that, right? You mentioned in our pre-call meeting, you kind of mentioned that you work with a lot of B2B professional service industry companies. And so I would guess that, you know, as a fractional COO, you're kind of using some of those tips and tricks and tools to really kind
Mm-hmm.
of grow and scale those companies, right?
Exactly. Yes, it's what the beautiful thing about it is that it is agnostic to any industry of businesses, typically within the realm of up to 250 employees. I've seen revenue ranges, you know, wildly all over the place, but typically businesses that I'm serving fractionally are 3 to 5 million and up, and at rapid growth phase. These are founders, visionary owners that are typically professional service based B2B businesses, right? So we're dealing a lot with like client services and service based industries, experts in their fields as well, right? Having homegrown from something that they were of expertise and wisdom and bringing that to the market. And they've since built an engine in a business of team members that are scaling that and scaling that as an operation. So that's typically within the realm of businesses that we're serving. And I say we with the team suite of fractional executives serving those businesses as well. But B2B has been, more of my background has all been in direct to consumer e-commerce businesses. So more of that D2C and consumers and customers and product-based organizations. And then the later half has been really what has been a sweet spot that I truly love, because there is more of that service element of those businesses that we can really hone in on, that people aspect, the relational aspect that I love so much that you don't get as much within the direct consumer space. Who's our ideal? Who are we working with? What are they saying about us? How can we leverage those relationships deeper? Those are the types of businesses that we're serving. But they're in industries from legal services to property management to marketing and PR firms to it's just a wide array, because the system truly is agnostic in that way of really it all comes down and boils down to a lot of the same fundamental issues, regardless of the business we're in and the businesses we serve. We are all in the business of people. So EOS is a system for managing that human energy and that human capital. So it's
Yeah.
really
And so
beautiful
you've,
that it can translate. Mm-hmm.
yeah. And so you've built, you know, your business and kind of taken a lot of these tools from the EOS world and created savvy strategic partners. And so, you know, now you've got a network of really great fractional executives that are able to provide probably their expertise in a number of different areas, but it's all in the same goal of kind of improving the operations side of a business. I think you mentioned in our pre-show meeting kind of this term operational capacity. And
Mm-hmm.
without getting too technical, you know, I do have a finance background. We could certainly break down a profit and loss, and I could show everybody where that's at. I'll save everybody the boredom. But really, occupational capacity, operational capacity is really, in my mind, the ability to kind of generate more revenue without dramatically increasing, you know, your G&A, your administrative costs. And so, one of the examples you gave me, Jill, was this PR team that you helped increase their operational capacity by 25%. And that's just goes to show, your ability to really take these organizations, diagnose what they have going on, and then implement some of these solutions. That's really exciting.
Yep, exactly. Well, thank you.
So Jill, I wanted to know, when you're working with a lot of these businesses, how do you kind of diagnose some of these issues? What are some of the questions that you ask? And even more specifically, what are some of the common issues that you see?
Yeah, really great questions. Diving deeper entails really a lot of the model of EOS is issue solving, IDS, which is coined, an abbreviation for identify, discuss, and solve. A lot of the practice in that, when you're working with teams, is the same kind of approach that I'll take, right? We're getting to the root of the issue. Oftentimes, businesses and owners that I'm talking to can talk a lot about the symptoms. They can talk a lot about, we're not reaching the right market, or our revenue has been stagnant, or we haven't been able to increase profitability. The team just doesn't understand what we're doing. I can't get the team to perform fast enough, better. A whole slew of symptoms. Right? Tell me everything that's wrong. Tell me everywhere you're stuck. Tell me the roadblocks. We can get the whole list of issues, but those are oftentimes symptoms, just by nature of I'm going to just, we're going to unleash all the areas in the business that I'm frustrated. So part of that is then, diving deeper, asking the right questions. It really is this beautiful process of identify first, discuss, and solve. In that discussion phase is where we're diving into the root. So it is about the right questions to ask. Tell me more about that. Have we tried this? Do we have, you name it? Do we have a person owning that? Do we know the data about how this is performing? A lot of those diving deeper entail a system that might be missing to actually track something. Is this just in their emotion? Or is this just a hunch we have that this is a problem? What is telling us this? What are we looking at? What are we measuring? Do we have accountability structures in place that it's clear in the team who's supposed to be doing that? Whose job is that? Right? So I could go on and on about the multitude of questions, because the conceptual and the concept of solving for an issue can be a multitude of symptoms. Oftentimes too, in that process, we have 10 issues that are really one, or multiple issues that really all drive back to one root. And so oftentimes in that kind of delineation of, here's all the symptoms we're talking about and all the pain points and the frustrations, or ideas too, an issue can be, here's opportunities we have yet to leverage on. We have this huge market to go after and we're not moving, or, any of those aspects of it can be kind of categorized into what is the root of that. And we're solving for the root, because typically at the root of something, we solve a multitude of issues throughout the organization where people are confused, something's not clear, we don't have some sort of process defined and documented well for the team to do that well. We're stuck on executing because of, this one root thing. So asking the right questions. Then what was your last question? Sorry.
Well, yeah, you were great getting into it, but I think
Yeah.
what I was getting to was, when you're working with these companies, what are some of the issues that you diagnose? When we were going through our pre-show meeting, you kind of mentioned that, hey, a lot of these B2B companies, what they really want, if they could just simplify, obviously they've got a lot of things going on, but they love to be able to grow their company without really having to do everything. And I think that's maybe every business owner's dream, but you have a really great process of identifying that.
Absolutely. So as far as kind of the core components of the business, oftentimes we're looking for, and the functions of the business. So when we're talking, how is the health of the business operationally, financially, and from a revenue standpoint, and ensuring there's health in all of those components driving that business forward. There's issues associated with each of those, as well as the categories and components of that business. alignment on a vision. Do we have a vision? Have you documented it? Is it clear? Do we have a sense, and does the team have a sense of where we're going? That's commonly an issue, first and foremost. Is that vision clear to the team? Because if we don't know where we're going, how do we know how we're going to get there and if we're on track to get there? Then next component of that is data. Issues that we often see within the data component is there's none. It's we either have so much data and we're tracking everything that we can't articulate, prioritize, where the focus areas and what's going to be the highest impact or highest priority for us to focus on. So the teams are often missing scorecards, which is another EOS tool of the system, tracking the right KPIs, knowing what data we're measuring. How do we know if we're on track? How do we know that everybody is aligned with their number one focus and alignment with what they're accountable to? So data, there's a handful of issues within that. Process is often an issue. We're moving, we're humming, we're working. The team is busy and inundated, but have we standardized the way we work? Have we standardized the approach? And do we have a proven methodology and outline clearly that the entire team shares, they know it, they live and breathe it, because it's done so consistently that we have a process established for success, from client onboarding to how they're served to what's after that, or what's kind of the ongoing phase of our work and our service to those clients. That is almost always the number one presented issue. It's like the owner knows it, and the dependency is so tied to the owner, and that process being completed meticulously and well every single time. Then there's issues pertaining to the team health, accountability. This is like kind of the focus point and components of traction. Do we have traction as a team? Do we know what our most important initiatives are? Are we meeting about it regularly? Do we have a cadence for when we're meeting, when we're talking about these things, what our working time together looks like? And are we consistent in having traction with getting done what we've set out and what is the primary objective of this quarter, of this year, right? And then people is at the heart of all of that. And that is where probably 70% of the issues lie. Right people in the right seats. Do we have a clear accountability chart? Everybody's roles are defined, responsibilities are clear, simplified, so that it's not just a matter of how the organization is structured, but everybody's contributing part is very clear. We've defined the success measures and the criteria for that role, for the growth the business needs. And we have a rock star A+ player in every single one of those roles. Yeah, that's a handful of them. That's kind of the majority of those big ones that come up every time.
Well, Jill, I'm really happy that we're talking, because not only can I tell that you have kind of done this at least a handful of times. You live and breathe the EOS world. I've got a bit of a case study of a company that I helped, and I wanted to talk to you about it because I think that you can lean into it a little bit, and we can maybe dissect it, get to know them a little bit. And in this first episode, we're definitely going to get into their issues. We'll save the solutions for the third episode, but just to kind of get, on the same page, bring our viewers into this case study. This is a company that I've helped for a number of years. They're based in Arizona. It's a family-ran business. It's a father and son kind of tag team. I'll talk about that a little bit more here in a second. But their industry is in the business-to-business world, like you said, that you deal with. And so to give a little bit more background on what they do, they have multiple locations. They have about a dozen crews, and they serve the restaurant industry. They've got over 1,000 restaurants that they serve in the Phoenix area. And so I was brought in by their banker. And believe it or not, I actually started my company cold calling on bankers and looking for turnaround projects, looking for workout projects, things like that. And so this banker and I built a relationship, and he said, Matt, this would be a really good project for you because the son is interested in buying the company from his dad. But surprise, surprise, I don't really know what the succession plan is. They don't really have a good handle on their financials. There's no real financial forecast. And so I quickly learned as, I got into this engagement that there was a lot of work to do. And so what I learned, Jill, and this maybe doesn't surprise you, and I hope that our viewers can relate. They didn't have an ERP. They didn't have kind of the common tools that a lot of well-run businesses had. With as many clients as they were serving, they were using spreadsheets, and they didn't have any software to kind of tell which crew was supposed to go where on what day. And so things were a little bit chaotic, to say the least. And what made me think about this case study for our conversation is this: the father and son team, and I use the air quotes because there was a bit of tension there. The father would take these long road trips and literally be unreachable for months at a time. And the son was kind of left to try and figure things out without a really clear vision of what that was supposed to be. The son had ideas of kind of how the business should function. He would implement, some things here and there. The father would not really jive with that and kind of step on his toes a little bit. And so we don't have to get into family dynamics, but what I wanted to bring you into was the business side of it. And some of the issues that you mentioned were very prevalent in this business. And what I wanted to ask you about, Jill, is this particular organization, if you were brought in to kind of fix things, what would be maybe some of the questions that you would ask? How would you kind of get the understanding of what's really going on there in that business?
Yep. Ooh, yeah. Lots of fun questions, right? I think what comes to mind first, just giving the dynamic and the relationship, is who's in charge, right? How are decisions made within the organization now? Are they clear about the delineation of roles, and what that succession plan looks like? Have they engaged with and advised and sought advisement on the succession plan and exit strategy, kind of more of that advisement from the personal standpoint, personal wealth standpoint too, in terms of what the current ownership structure is and what their goals are and kind of exit. What their resources are in terms of those elements first, to at least identify a plan and what that transfer of ownership is going to entail. Other things that come to, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say the first question you asked was like, who's in charge? And that's not really the exact question that I ask when I go into companies, but I do want to find that out at some point. And what I always find interesting is, depending on who you ask, they have a different answer. And so when I asked the son who's in charge, he said me. And he wasn't really, like puffing his chest out, but he's like, yeah, like I run the business. I'm here every day. The crews know me. I'm first in, last out kind of guy. And so I asked the crews, I was like, all right, well, you lead, a crew of 5 guys, Mr. Crew Leader. Who's in charge? And he stopped for a second and he said, well, who's asking? I was like, well, what do you mean? I'm asking. I'm just, my name's Matt. What do you mean?
Yeah.
And he's like, well, no, but it depends, because sometimes it's the son and sometimes it's the dad, and it really kind of depends on who's standing in front of me. And I was like, that's interesting. There probably is an accountability chart, but perhaps the father doesn't really follow it, is kind of my guess there. And so that certainly presents a number of issues. But the second question that you asked was, about that accountability chart. And, even though the roles might be documented one way, if it's not carried out and it's not followed by all, that's going to present some issues, right? I mean, I'm sure you've seen that once or twice in your world. And so, as we're getting into this case study, those are the issues that we really see. They're not going to be able to grow the company. They're not going to be able to have a succession plan if they don't, kind of get on the same page with some of these things. And specifically the people issues. You mentioned, accountability and structure, which are some of my favorite words, but it's kind of cheap if it's not followed. And I think the EOS world calls it followed by all. And so it's not going to work unless it's followed by the owner. It kind of starts at the top with the dad. So We'll get into some of your solutions in our third episode, Jill,
Yeah.
but just to kind of, wrap up this first episode here. I think that it's really great that we're having this conversation and that we're able to kind of lean on the structure that EOS provides, because there are a lot of tools that are available, whether it's an accountability chart, who does what, why. You mentioned scorecard, which is, one of my favorite tools because there's a lot of metrics there. It is a really great way for the leadership team within the organization to make some decisions on practical, up-to-date advice, data to then, be able to make decisions from. And then in terms of structure, if the son really is going to buy the company, is the dad on board with that? Is there a succession plan in place? And that was what I was brought in to figure out. There wasn't one. And I quickly realized that the words succession plan were kind of triggering for both the son and the dad. And so we had to kind of get there, but calling it something different was maybe, part of that process.
Sure.
I'm not so concerned with the titles of certain things, but want to make sure that we're getting to the solution one way or the other. And so, again, I'm just really happy we're unpacking this case study. I would, again, kind of summarize these issues as they're not going to be able to grow. They're going to have some people issues if they don't solve these things. And ultimately, the business is not going to have a successful plan of kind of transitioning ownership if they're not able to figure these things out. And so I do want to just briefly mention in our second episode, you and I are going to go over some cautionary tales, which is always really exciting because this is the part of our time together where we get to maybe talk about some times when customers or clients don't listen to us. I know that maybe some folks in the consulting world present themselves as, everybody always listens and everything's always fine and every engagement always works out. But the reality is sometimes people do things their own way. They listen and they don't really do, or they don't execute it quite how we had prescribed. And so you've got a couple of cautionary tales. I've got one as well. That's episode 2. I just want to tease those a little bit. Yours is from rocket start to crash landing, how one tech company's inaction led to near downfall. I'm excited to hear what that one is. I've got a story of 2 young founders that were 50-50 owners when I met them, and I couldn't figure out who was in charge. So we're going to talk about that. And then your second cautionary tale is titled Sky High Early Success to Flying Blind. And so I hope everybody joins us for episode 2, which will be just coming up here in just a minute.